Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your boy CIZZY, live action from Kansas City, Missouri. You already know how we get down every single Friday. We come back with a fire guest. I feel like I haven't lied to y'all in weeks, but y'all let me know in the comments. Y'all let me know in the DMs if I've been bringing on some trash ass guests, but I doubt it. So, with that being said, we're going to jump right into it and have our guest today introduce themselves. Go ahead, my brother.
What's up? I'm Nasir Anthony Montalvo. Excited to be on the show. Pronouns
Hell
are them
yeah.
theirs.
Hell yeah, man. Thank you for deciding to come on the show today, making some time. So please start off with who is Nasir? Your perspective, your point of view. Feel free to embellish on yourself, but please tell us who is Nasir?
I don't think I need to embellish. I think I'm pretty poppin'. Let me stop. But I just came to Kansas City in July 2021. I was born and raised in Kissimmee, Florida. I'm Afro-Latina, Jamaican and Puerto Rican. Grew up in Florida for like all the way through high school, went to college up north in Hoboken, New Jersey at Stevens Institute of Tech, majored in business and tech, concentrations in marketing and info systems, minored in literature. But I feel like in college, I got really involved in campus organizing and social justice and advocating for my communities. So that's what a lot of what I took away from my college experience. Moved to Kansas City in the summer of 2021 as part of a fellowship called Venture for America. Got matched with Startland, like Startland News. But I mainly work on Startland Education. We're teaching like human-centered design to local schools, educators, students, to help like redesign the education system. And then freelance, I write for the Kansas City Defender, their Black digital news nonprofit. That is a lot, but yeah, that's
Nah,
me in a nutshell.
that was a great breakdown and a great start to some of the questions that I want to ask you today. So first off, let me tell you that I have never heard of that part of Florida. So I need you to break down the culture of Kissimmee, Florida. Like what did the demographics look like? What is the area known for? Is there a specific type of food or I don't know, festival or something that people come to that part of Florida for? Like, please update me on your upbringing in Kissimmee, Florida, and what that was like and how it kind of influenced who you are today.
Yeah. Two questions. You know where Orlando is? Like, you know Orlando? Yeah. So Kissimmee is, and then second follow-up question. Have you ever watched the movie The Florida Project?
I have not.
Well, basically, Kissimmee is like the outskirts of Orlando, but because of all like the money that's siphoned into Orlando and Walt Disney and all that jazz, um, Kissimmee kind of gets like the bad end of the stick. A lot of people who live there, it's kind of like the missing West Indies there. There's a lot of Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Jamaicans. Kind of explains like my background. But yeah, it's like the mini Caribbean there. Um, I don't think like a lot goes on there. I feel like everybody from Kissimmee is either like they grow up there and live there for the rest of their life, or like they leave after high school. I also think that there's like this like migration thing that happens where like a lot of um Caribbean people like go up to New York, live there, and then they're like, when they start wanting to have a family, have kids, they're like, oh, I can't raise my kid in New York and come down to Florida, specifically Kissimmee for some reason. So, yeah, I kind of feel like that's like how the city is like demographic wise. Um, and because of that, I feel like I grew up like a lot of people who like looked like me to some degree. Um, I feel like school, and you already know school like in the news in Florida is like not the most quality education.
Yeah, at least according to the news.
Yeah, yeah. very much not quality education. Like there's a lot of like flawed things happening there. So I feel like I was always like a really like a pretty smart student, or at least good at school, you know. Um not so yeah. So I feel like because of that, like my upbringing gets kind of like jaded in that sense because I feel like in the education system, at least in Florida, like the kids who are like in honors classes and stuff, very much like segregated from the rest of the students. And then all the people who are in the honors classes are like white people. So that
Interesting.
was kind of tough. And then I was in like the international baccalaureate program in high school, and that is we were at like a magnet school. So like the rest of the school is like a public high school, but then like there was like 70 of us who were like at the high school, but like not at the high school, if that makes sense.
It does. It
So
does.
yeah, that was just kind of like weird too. But Florida's all right. Kissimmee's cute.
Yeah, it sounds like just based off of the amount of, the type of people that you described, that aside from high school, like there is a lot of, external cultural influence outside of like American culture. Like, so was there, I don't know, what were parties like? What were family functions like? I don't know. It gives very much New York City vibes, but in a warm place, just because of the amount of cultures you said. It was like a mini Caribbean, and we all know Caribbeans know how to party and they got good food. So I'm just wondering, like, was that vibe prevalent there when you like were like 17, 18? Was there a lot of like fun parties? Was there a lot of like, dope cultural vibes outside of school, or was that non-existent?
To be honest, I can't really. I know the parties are popping, but I can't really tell you because my family was like real strict, which is also I think a part of Latina culture. It's like you staying in the house like until you die or you move out. So
Right.
yeah, I can't really tell you about the parties, but yeah, I think definitely because it's like the mini Caribbean, a lot of those influences are in Kissimmee. I don't think there were any ever really like any parades or like festivals like specific. Cause you know how in New York they do like the Puerto Rican Day Parade or like the West Indian Parade and stuff. I don't think they really like did it to that scale in Kissimmee, but you know, there are little like hangouts and functions or theme things like happening down there. I also think in Kissimmee a lot of people into cars, so there are always like a lot of car shows and racing and
Okay,
stuff
vibe.
like that.
So the Kansas City sideshows ain't nothing new to you.
No, to be honest, I think the ones that Kissimmee are better, but
I respect it. I respect it. I
yeah.
respect it. And it makes me want to ask, you mentioned your parents' background. So have you ever been back to, the mainland, the homeland from some of your, ancestors, your parents, your grandparents? Have you ever been, back home? And if so, what was that experience like? Was there anything like you learned or grasped from that experience that you've taken into like community organizing and really like standing up for your community?
Yeah, so I didn't grow up with my Jamaican side. My dad was just kind of like a deadbeat. So I don't really like know that side at all. I grew up mainly with my Puerto Rican side. And I have visited Puerto Rico, I want to say 3 times. Once when I was a baby, once when I was like a little older than that. And then the only time I remember was like when I was like, I want to say 8 or 9 was the last time I went. Um, and that time I went, I think was really hard. We went to go visit like my stepdad's family. And they just didn't like live in great conditions. And I remember going to see like my I don't know what family member you would call this, but like my great grandfather's sister. So like my great aunt, I don't know. We went to go see her. And she was like, you know, disabled, like living in a really small apartment, didn't have access to hot water, roaches everywhere. And it was just like really sad. Um, And I feel like what I took with me is that I think like my family was blessed, but not blessed in a way where it's like, oh, like we came up and like we doing good now and stuff. Blessed in a way that's like, there's so much work to be done to like aid other people like living in those conditions. And I feel like that was like a really transformative experience for me, like especially at that age. Um, so yeah, I feel like that's what I took from Puerto Rico. And I feel like now, especially with the rise of like Latina artists like Bad Bunny and Cardi B and stuff like that, like it's coming like we're seeing like more of the happenings in Puerto Rico like coming to the main stage. And I think that's really important, but also I feel like this has been happening for like years upon years. So it's just like, yeah, like a lot of work needs to be done. And that's kind of like how those experiences affected me.
And sometimes it's hard to see, like, especially from, I mean, obviously you have a connection to Puerto Rico, but like when something like there's an uprise where people start to hear about something and they're like, why isn't anybody paying attention? And then it falls off, like in terms of from the public eye, it's hard to see when and where progress has happened. There's something I think about a lot because I'm like super, maybe to a fault, extremely optimistic. So it's like, my family's from Tanzania, from East Africa, and I remember like going back and visiting over the years. So what I remember is like how things, progressed each time I went back. So I'm like, oh, this progression, this progression. But then, something will pop up in the news like the other day, like, oh, all these funds that were supposed to go to the Tanzanian schools are going actually to the, basically being siphoned out and put somewhere else. The money for the school systems are being stolen. Kids are still going to poor schools. And then everyone's focused on that, the negative aspect of the tough things happening. But I'm always like, I wish there would be, I guess, more information put out there about like what has happened in terms of progress. So like when I think about Puerto Rico, we've had a lot of huge artists, actually, I'm sure but definitely a lot of huge artists over the past 15, 20 years come out of Puerto Rico. We have, and forgive me if I'm totally wrong here, but I'm pretty 95% sure that I'm right. So we have Daddy Yankee, um we have what's his name, Nicky Jams. We got a whole bunch of stars that have come out of there that have talked about the situations that are happening in PR, and but then it like will disappear out of the media again and then come back because Bad Bunny speaking about something and then go down. So I guess like for you, somebody who's actually in the field, like really involved in community impact on the ground, like how does it feel when things, I guess, aren't, what's the word I want to use? Um, I don't know, not talked about. You're in media, you're in community impact. So say something good is going on. Let's just use Kansas City, for example. Maybe there's some progress happening around. I'm just going to bring up something fairly relevant that we'll talk about, but like just, I don't know, like the black community or something. Maybe there's something good that's happening in the community in terms of feedback from the government or just more people being involved in speaking up about something, but then people are only focused on the negative. I guess how, as a writer or as a person in media, do you find ways to focus on the positive and the good things that are happening? That was a long ass tailwind. I hopefully you grabbed the question I was trying to ask there. My apologies.
No, yeah, I definitely grabbed the question. I'm trying to digest that. Um, I guess I would say that I think, yeah, like of course, like it's important to like report on the positive and things like that. I feel like I just like to keep it real, I feel like. And so like especially in the Kansas City Defender, like we strive to be like abolitionists. And so I feel like yeah, we just like to like keep it like a buck 50, and like if things like aren't going bad, I mean aren't going good, like I don't like try to like force myself to like report on the good, if that makes sense. Like for example, um I don't know if you heard about the case about the missing Black women in Kansas
Yeah.
City
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, like the woman escaped from Timothy Haslett's basement. She's going by the alias TJ. And yeah, Haslett got arrested. I think he got indicted, but I'm not sure. And so, like, yeah, of course, it's like a mini win, but it's like that has like now unpacked like all this stuff. Um, and I feel like the ways in which like we try to stay positive, like as reporters and as people in the media, is like being in community amidst one another and like um trying to do fun things together, things like surrounding mental health and stuff. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like we'll celebrate like once like actual progress is like happening. But like if the state or the system um is only like moving inch by inch by inch, I don't think like they deserve to be lauded, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
That does. I feel you. Sometimes where there's like excess celebration when something really impactful hasn't actually happened. Maybe they took a step in the right direction, but it was literally like an inch. So to celebrate them or celebrate that could detract from the progress that still needs to be made. If I'm
Yeah,
hearing you correctly.
yeah, for sure. I think that definitely makes sense. And I think that that can apply to like Puerto Rico too. Like I remember like in the fifth grade, um our class was like our teacher like gave us a debate. It was like on Puerto Rico, and it was like whether or not Puerto Rico like should become a state or secede and become its own country or something. And
Mhm.
I feel like that's conversation that's happening like right now. And that debate, fifth grade, when was that? Like
15
I
years
don't
ago,
even,
right?
yeah, that long ago. And so yeah, like sure, like when the progress is made or whatever, like it'll be reported on, but I, I don't think it's time to celebrate, at least not yet, because like barely anything has changed. Like it's been like so long, at least in my lifetime. But
No, and I respect that. I feel like that's such that can turn into a long conversation, so we'll save that for later. But I feel like also, you know, that question can be dived deeper on from a perspective of like when is the right time going to be, because there's always going to be need for progress. Like I don't think there's ever a stopping point there. Like that's the beautiful thing about life, is as long as we focus on progress, we'll continue to grow, right? But there's never really, I don't, at least I don't particularly believe in a peak, like a country or a community or a government can hit a peak like, wow, we've done everything so amazing, like there's nothing else to progress on. So it's like finding those moments of like when is going to be the right time to celebrate, or when are we going to talk more about the wins that have been happening in this specific effort. But again, that can turn into a longer conversation, but hopefully it kind of sparks people's mind to think a little bit more about that. But on the same topic, I do kind of want to ask you, you've had, over the past year and a half, I've been seeing your name all over everything, active on LinkedIn, active on the KC Defender, active on IG, active in the community, seeing you at community events, just I just see you in the streets for real. You know what I'm saying? You outside. So, I feel like I'm comfortable saying you've had an impressive career thus far in terms of advocacy, community organizing, especially for the Black and Latinx and queer community. So could you maybe share a formative moment that inspired you to dedicate your life to this work? I know you mentioned that it kind of
mm,
started in college, but was there a specific moment that was like, oh shit, like this, they need a voice like me outside. You know what I'm saying? They need me to get up in the streets. They need some extra help. So is there a moment you can think back to that was really impactful?
yeah, I really like this question. So yeah, definitely the formative moment for me was in college. So I did. it's definitely like a lot of things like built up, you know, like some of the things like were happening in high school as well, like just coming into my identity and stuff. But when I went to college, I went to a predominantly like white institution. So um for my first year, I was like, I made a mistake. Like I need to get the hell out of here. Like it was like
My man was in Get Out. He was like,
yeah, no, for real. Like it was a lot. The percentage of underrepresented people on campus, and according to Stevens, where I went to school, it was what comprised underrepresented was Black, Latine, um, and something else. But like Asians like weren't counted in that because like they like made like some like large portion of the population. But in terms of what Stevens defined as underrepresented, like in STEM, there was only 3% of us on campus out of all that. And then of all the Black students, I want to say it was like in the point something. I don't remember. I want to say it was 0.7, but just like very, very small. Um, and of course, like for professors, like it reflected the same. But you know, with PWIs, like they want to like advertise the students like on campus, like take photos as well as take videos, put it all over the website, put it on social media, whatever. So here I am like suffering like my first year, like trying to get out of here. My
you
sophomore year
you brought
starts.
those advertisement photos to the admin. Like, where is this man? This one right here. This lady. I seen them when I was coming to the school. I thought I had homies. Where they at?
Well, so basically when my sophomore year started, they email basically all of Black and brown people on campus and like all the cultural organizations and are like, oh, we're doing like, so they said some social media series and we want you all to feature in it, and like sent us an Excel sheet with like times for us to sign up. And the reason we all knew is because they didn't put us in BCC, they put us in CC. So we just saw like it was all the Black and brown people on campus. And I was like, are you serious? So I like replied back. I was like in the middle of class, heated, just like mad, and wrote like this long email basically saying like you're exploiting us. Like no one you have CC'd on this email is happy here, and like you want to like take photos of us. Like we don't have like resources on campus. So like my school, we didn't have like an office for diversity, equity, and inclusion, which a lot of other campuses had. And in our library archives, they have like this plaque on this enslaved person who used to work on the campus, and the plaque basically said that he enjoyed like working for the family at the college, which is terrible. So and that's just like, you know, like two little pieces. Like there's just like so much bad things like happening there. So I sent that email heated. um they asked to have a meeting with me, and I told them like all these things like that needed to happen, and like from there I kind of like took those initiatives I brought to them, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this and like form a group of people on campus to like who are passionate about this and want to help me like achieve this. So I ended up like forming like this committee and our student government called the Diversity Inclusion Committee. And like from there, like we did a lot of different initiatives. We founded like the first safe space for marginalized students on campus. It was called the Intercultural Space. We held the first Pride event on campus, and we had like a drag queens and drag kings like show up, and it was like really, really dope, like seeing how like the campus like reacted to all of that. We protested like this building that was named after this like anti-trans, racist, creationist alumni of the school who's now the governor of Montana. Shout out Greg Gianforte, not really. And yeah, we just did like a lot of things that I think like really helped like change the direction that campus was going. And so yeah, I think long story short, the formative experience for me was just like being exploited. Like I was like we were being used to give promo for the school and we were like all
blatantly.
unhappy. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Um, and I feel like that, just follows me like everywhere as like an organizer and like why I really believe in abolition. But yeah.
And so combined with that, the message and the experience that you share while at Stevens, how also has your background and upbringing in Kissimmee influenced your perspective and approach when it comes to your work as a writer of the KC Defender, and then again, like we've been talking about, as a community organizer. So obviously that experience had a huge impact, but has your background or your upbringing in Kissimmee and any of the experiences you had there also influenced your perspective or approach in this work? And if so, how?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like the biggest thing from like my upbringing and like my own identities is definitely around like the ways identities intersect and being able to like exist with multiple things as once, and also acknowledging like intersectionality and the way like systems of oppression function. So applying that to like college and me as a writer and things like that. At college, remember I grew up in like a Puerto Rican upbringing. So initially, like I wanted to join like I forget what it's called there, the Latinas Student Association or something like that. Like all the Latinas clubs, there's like a Latina frat and stuff. But these are all the people in those clubs are all like white Latinas. Like I want to say I was probably like one of two or three like Afro Latinos that I knew were at Stevens. And I didn't feel welcome in those spaces. And a lot of those people like to use the N word and things like that. And it didn't like make me feel welcome. And so also too, I wanted to join like the gay organizations that were there. I don't remember any of the names of the orgs, but the gay one, the LGBT one, and there was only like white LGBT people there, and I also just did not feel welcome. They didn't create like a welcoming environment for me, and I joined like the Black Student Union, and I feel like throughout my upbringing, because I didn't really have like the Black influence like in my household. Um, Joining the Black Student Union like really helped me like hone in on my Blackness and helped me understand like some of the experiences I had growing up that I wouldn't have otherwise understood if I wasn't in community with my peers.
And that
Um,
must have been an interesting perspective from, like, if I don't know if this was your situation, but I know that there's a very strong history with Dominicans and Puerto Ricans not necessarily identifying with their blackness or denying their blackness. So I just to double down on what you were sharing right there, I'm sure that really was a informational, intuitive, like deep experience for you, I would assume.
oh, for sure, 100%. Yeah, and that definitely goes into my background as well. Like only growing up in my Puerto Rican household, and honestly, a lot of my family exhibiting anti-blackness in certain ways, not necessarily being like outright racist, like I hate black people, but if my hair would get too long, they'd be like, you look crazy, you look ghetto, and yeah, that's not good. Like you shouldn't do that. If I act a certain way or did this. Um, and I think that's also why I ended up like being in these programs and being around like white people growing up. So yeah, anyways, I feel like the I'm trying to connect this back to your original question. Yeah, just like existing as like multiple identities and like my background, like being in these like different groups has definitely shaped the way I'm a community organizer. Um, because I'm just able to like be mindful of like all of these things at once. Um, and I feel like that's important in order to build a movement that involves as much community as possible, because I think movements for social justice fail like as soon as they're exclusive, because at that point, like, then what's the point? Like, just stop. So yeah.
And you lightly touched on it right there, but that just brings up another question. I mean, especially between 2019 and 2023, from a multitude of perspectives, both from a community impact or just community perspective. That's funny using that word based off the question I'm about to ask, but anyways, like especially from what was going on, over the during the pandemic, and then also from a business perspective in terms of what a lot of tech businesses were focused on. The word community is what I'm trying to get to. The word community was used a lot between 2019, the beginning of the pandemic, and up to now. So like sometimes it can get used so much that it gets like lost in the sauce, and we kind of lose sight of what community actually is. So from your perspective, and this can be kind of a word to anybody out there who's overusing the word. This can be a word to businesses trying to get a finger on how to build community. But for you, being involved in everything you're involved in, how would you define community, and what would you say are some core pillars in building true community?
That is a big question.
Take time to
Oh,
reflect, brother. Take time to reflect.
yeah. I think community can take like a lot of different shapes, and I think community is like at its core, it's like, people who you break bread with, people who you can like rely on to support whatever. And I think there can be like, good communities and bad communities. Like, I think the KKK wants to break bread with one another, but I don't think that's necessarily like a good community. So to your point, like, um, I think, yeah, people can use the words in ways where it's like, oh, I don't know necessarily if your community is like, one, I'm trying to be part of, and two, your community maybe is trying to like oppress me in some way. But for a community to be a community that is open, welcoming, transformative, radical, I really think the pillar and like the praxis they need to operate on is one of love. And that sounds corny, but I read All About Love by Bell Hooks last year, and this year I started the year by reading Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. And I think l- love is so important in that a lot of things like go into love, and building a praxis out of love. Love basically means like you're going to care for this person. Bell Hooks like says there's like 6 different things that go into love. So maybe that's like a pillars like within pillars. But basically, if you do all these things to love another person and to build community with that person, um, doing every you're doing everything right, you're trying to build a community that's transformative, that cares for one another, a community that's going to be good, a community that's going to change the way the world is right now. And I think like if more people like realize that the work community organizers and like social justice workers are trying to accomplish is out of love, like it's rooted in love, um, I feel like we would be like a lot farther than we are now. Um, Especially because I feel like the people who are like detractors are trying to take away like whatever their reasons are for wanting to be hateful or like wanting to be oppressive or whatever. If they just like took 2 seconds, well, maybe not 2 seconds, maybe like a month to reflect on what love means and how like they are not operating out of love, they're operating from like a place of hate. Yeah, I feel like we would be a lot farther because who wants to be like a hateful person for no reason? Like, um, so yeah, I don't know. That
And
was
that
like kind of all over the place, but
No, it's all good. It's all good. I think what that, hopefully will like allow the listeners to do is to really reflect on how we as a human race can coexist together, and what characteristics and what behaviors are necessary for each one of us to embrace and act on a daily basis to create that energy, or that I guess worldwide space that allows everyone to feel safe, comfortable, invited, and welcoming, so that we can all like truly exist in this world together, like, and love each other without all these little mini divisions we like to create, every day, which is tough for all of us. Obviously there are the big oppressive organizations and individuals, of course, that have existed in the past and have now existed in new ways in the future. But like, if we can really figure out, I think even the people who are oppressed struggle to like love the people who oppress them. You know what I'm saying? It becomes so difficult when we think about that. It's like something I've always struggled with. It's like, okay, we're one human race, we're all one human family. Like, I should love everyone the same, but then I'll like reflect on the history of oppression or something, and like naturally certain level, certain energy that maybe isn't in the name of community or coexistence comes out. And so just trying to like navigate our way around that as a human being. So I want to kind of like ask that question to you, like, how do you navigate, friendships, interactions, the quality of love, I guess, with the human race as a whole, even knowing like the certain preconceived notions people might have about you? Like, how do you still go out there and try to love that person? Or do you? Maybe you don't, and that's okay. but like, or like, how do you approach that? I don't know if that question makes sense, but I hope it does.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think the way I practice love is definitely through my organizing work. It's because I want better for Black people, for queer people, for Black queer people, for Latino people. Um, and everything I do is 100% out of a practice of love. All of the work I'm doing right now for the Kansas City Defender on like the Black Queer History Project, that is like all freelance. Like the only thing like I have gotten like paid out of that, Ryan gave me like a very small stipend for like the first two articles. And to preface, this is all totally fine because the Kansas City Defender, like real startup mode right now, Ryan is the only full-time person working there, the only person like technically like getting a salary. So only got paid two small salaries for the first two articles. And then the third article slash the exhibits, like only way I was compensated out of that was because of the commemorative merchandise. But I didn't even go into that like wanting to make the merchandise because I was like, oh, I want to make money. Like I did all of this is because I want to be able to spread the spread the histories and like educate the Kansas City community about Black queer history happening in Kansas City, but also at the same time, like by spreading that history, by educating people, I think I'm also helping liberate histories
Mm,
that are being erased because
mm,
of homophobia, because of racism.
mm-hmm.
And that is all out of love. And so, kind of going back to your question, when it comes to people who are oppressive, who are hateful, I think that the ways in which love functions, I don't love anybody who's racist, but I think that if I continue doing the work and if people continue doing the work to get people to like hone in on this praxis and like at the very least like pick up a book so they can unlearn these things and commit to doing better, um that's how you start like building these communities and how you start building like a foundation like out of love, right?
And I like
um
that. I want to challenge you on that though, really quick. Like, wouldn't you, would, or not, wouldn't you, would you, what are your thoughts on like the idea that wouldn't you say love is a principle or a character trait that is, I guess, needed to be present when, or needs to be present when trying to engage individuals who might have racist racist behaviors? I guess what I'm saying is, like, when we come at an
Mm.
individual like that, or an oppressive individual with energy that maybe isn't so loving, that it makes it more difficult for them to embrace the idea of change, or embrace the desire to go and unlearn the ignorance that they've embraced. I don't know if and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I do want to hear what your thoughts are on that being a potential direction.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I feel like I come at it like indirectly, probably, and there are people who are much better suited than me to have those loving conversations with those people. I feel like a lot of the work I do and I'm passionate about is like an empowerment and trying to fight these various things like for the betterment of my community, what you call it, intrinsically. I think that there are definitely people who are committed to having one-on-ones or discussions or attacking oppressive policy or systems or organizations like more head on. And I think that they definitely have to operate out of a praxis of love. And I feel like I don't want to like misconstrue that love means that niceness or kindness. I don't think that love means that. I think love, as Bell Hooks defines it, is wanting to see like somebody else. Like you love someone if you want to see their spirit like grow to become like something better. And that's what she defines as the difference between like love and care. Like care for someone is just like surface level, like I like I care for you, but maybe I don't want to like commit to seeing you grow.
I respect
Um,
that.
and so I feel like the people who are committing to fighting these fighting these things, like I said, is love. I'm not gonna do that directly. Other people can do
No, that's
that.
important to
Yeah.
realize, though. No, I actually respect you saying that, because it's important for us to acknowledge what is going to be our best way to be of service. For me, I look at it from like every activity I do, whether it's community engagement, whether it's a motivational video, whether it's this podcast, whether it's like how I treat people in a day-to-day life, is to, like, for me, to love and know God through serving his people. For me, that's just my perspective. So, like, when I think about that, there are thousands of ways to serve God and to serve his people, but not every way is for me. It may not be something that I'm going to be able to manage right now. And I feel like that's what I'm hearing you say, which I respect a lot. Is like, look, I try every day to be of service. That's what I'm here. That's what I hear you saying. That's what I see you doing. And there are certain paths that aren't going to be my path of being of service, because that's just not what I'm built for right now in that way. That's not that surpasses my desires or capacity. So either way, I respect that. So I do want to on the topic of the Black queer Kansas City history, can you share, during your research and during putting that whole um series together, can you share what has been the most surprising or maybe fascinating discovery you've made during your research for this project? Whether it's an interesting
Oh,
story, or maybe it's an interesting individual with an interesting background. I don't know, anything that comes to mind.
damn, this is kind of hard because I feel like there's so much stuff. Whew, what is one good story to tell? Um, Maybe I can kind of do like a conglomeration of like all three. So like across the three kind of articles I wrote, and remember how I said how this is about like liberating history from like a system that can be racist and homophobic and one or the other, both at the same time, is that I feel like across like all three articles, um, I think it was just interesting seeing the ways in which like either like anti-blackness, like from queer people, like formed, or like anti-queerness from the rest of the KC population, like formed, and like how these people like navigated all that, and like the actions they did to really like turn Kansas City into what it is today. So for example, the second article I wrote was on this organization called Men of All Colors Together, and it was this group of gay men, primarily black and white gay men, who were fighting racism amidst the gay community in Kansas City. Um, and one of the things they did is that there was this gay bar called the Dixie Belle Bar, but they hung a Confederate flag, a gay bar with a Confederate flag, which is like, what? And so this organization like basically like wrote this like letter like condemning them for this, not in like a Nazi tone or anything, but basically advocating for change and asking them to take it down. And also alluding in the letter that there were various practices that that bar and various other gay bars in Kansas City were doing, whether it was like there was like some like unspoken rule where they couldn't let a certain amount of black people into the gay club or else it wouldn't be appealing for people to come. So there was like this like quiet ratio, and if black people would come into the line and be like, oh, you can't come in right now, but other white people were like let into the gay bar. And these were things seen like in the first article I wrote, which was like 10 years prior, 15 years prior. And then it kind of goes like in a timeline. So if like the Men of All Colors thing is like the 1990s-ish, the Black drag queen article I wrote was like 1970s, 1980s. Um, Late 1990s, well, mid 1990s, that gay and lesbian variety show, we kind of see it again, but like in a different way, where like um this group of gay protesters were like chanting basically anti-black chants at Emmanuel Cleaver, like trying to get one of those things passed. So I think that that's probably the most interesting thing to me again, because I like being able to like, well, not I like, but I think it's important to like call out these things, and like one to show like how these black queer individuals are able to persevere like through all that, and like again shape KC into kind of what it is today. um I think it's important to like share those histories, especially in 2023, because people need to like be reflective and be mindful, which leads me through my third point, why these histories like weren't able to be found in the first place. Like they're when I first came to KC in the summer of 2021, there was like literally nothing. I was trying to find like Black queer community, and the only thing I could find was Blackout, which is like this organization fighting HIV and AIDS amidst Black gay men. But other than that, nothing. It was like that was a top thing, and then another search was like a post on Reddit, someone asking like, where can I find Black queer people in Kansas City? And like nothing. And the responses are like nothing. I think somebody wrote Blackout, and then everybody else was just like the gay things, but not that specific community. And so, yeah, that was like long-winded too.
No,
But
I appreciate it though. I appreciate that. I feel like you are able to share, a little insight that will allow people to kind of be aware of the series that you just did and now go research that, which is kind of my intention with that question. Not everybody was able to make it there in person, but now people can go out there, contact you, and or read some of these write-ups you wrote, and or go do their own research, which is obviously what we really actually want is for people to actually take the time out to go educate themselves. So on that same topic, nonetheless, in your opinion, what is the most pressing issue facing the queer community today? If you'd like to make it specific to the Black community, feel free, but in general, facing the queer community today, and what steps can we as a community, and what I mean by community is, community, everyone, queer or not, do to take, as individuals and as a society to address it? Or like, what can people listening right now do to address whatever pressing issue you might share with us right now?
Yeah, I definitely feel like the most pressing issue is that I feel like legislation, both like locally and nationally, is like regressing. Um, and obviously, like top of mind is like Florida, Don't Say Gay bill. There's like a lot of bills in Kansas right now targeting trans people, specifically like trans kids. Like people in school who already like have no agency like to vote or do anything, and like having their like rights stripped away to like participate in sports and things like that. And it's just like really disheartening. Like to again like on progress, like to see progress and then like see it taken away like at the snap, at the what snap of a finger or whatever the saying is. I think the most important thing like people can do now is, I don't know if, I think voting locally is definitely important. And elections are coming up, so like to read up on politicians who are running locally, and make sure they're LGBT friendly, please. I think Kansas City like definitely gets like sucked up like in the housing and like Casey Thomas and stuff, which I think is really, really important. Um, but there are like a lot of other things that go along with just like someone's views on housing in Kansas City. So I just want like people to be like mindful of that and make sure to really vote for a candidate who's gonna advocate on the basis of identity. But yeah, I feel like definitely vote locally and just talk to queer people, go to queer things. I feel like a lot of people be scared to just like go to a gay bar one time or go to a gay club or go to a gay queer owned business or I just like support anything queer in fear of being like called queer themselves. But if like, you're securing your identity, I think it's fine. And um yeah, I think that that's the other important thing too, is just to be comfortable and like talk talk to people, and relish like and what all of our community has to offer. Because if people don't know what's happening with queer community, they can't go out and help these people either. So
That's real. That's real. That's very real. And that was supposed to be my final question, but that sparked one more question in my head. So, you know, two questions, but either way. um, so I wanted to ask you, as a member of the queer community, like thinking back to when you were a kid, right? Like, I want to say before middle school or just in that general age, like seventh grade and under. What do you think would have been the value of having representation on shows you were watching or like books you were reading?
mm,
Um, the reason I bring this up is I'm hearing a lot of debate amongst parents who aren't members of the queer community talking about how they feel like this is too early in terms of exposure to, which I find just weird because I'm like, you're going to be exposed to queer kids regardless in school, no matter whether your kid is queer or not. They're going to have these friendships. They're going to meet these people. These people are just like you are. They're not separated. There's no division. So, anyways, I would love to hear from you, a member of the queer community, what value you think you would have saw in that as a kid in terms of representation in books and movies and shows.
um I think representation would have been like really, really important, really, really transformative because I can't remember being exposed to anything like LGBT related till I got to high school. And it wasn't because like the curriculum had that or anything. It was because I was able to see like other queer people at the school, um, and like see people who are out and bravely doing so because people are mean and for no reason. And so well, for reasons that are like rooted in bad things. But yeah, I think representation like would have been really, really important. And to your point, yeah, I don't understand the point in censoring education from like these topics, because especially now, like everybody has a phone, like so people can just like Google stuff anyway. So wouldn't you want um
To be a
your
part of that conversation.
yeah, to be a part of that conversation? Wouldn't you want your child's school to not teach it in a certain way, because I think that's wrong, but just like expose children to that, and some sort of facilitation, a lot of, instead of letting your child having to like find out from themselves and hide it from you because you're
Because they're
trying
worried
to
about how
hide it
you're
from
going to
them.
react. Right.
Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, I think like representation anywhere is extremely important. And that would have been really important to me as a child. I think I probably would have known sooner about like my identity and stuff if I had gotten exposed earlier, because I don't think I really knew till high school. I didn't really accept myself till high school. And then yeah, so having that material sooner, I think, would also help with like your child's overall like emotional like well-being. But yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. Well, Nasir, my guy, I appreciate you making time to jump on the Voices of Value show today. The Voices of Value kind of speaks for itself. We really just try to bring individuals on to share some sort of value and be able to have conversations and dialogue around topics that are important in general. And although we do lean heavy towards business, I think it was important to kind of step out of that lane and have this discussion today. And so I appreciate you being the individual that decided to make time to come on and touch on some of these topics, which hopefully we can make a part two in a few months and dive even deeper. Um, I do ask every single guest that comes onto the show one final question, which is, you've lived until 110 years old and you've experienced everything you've wanted to experience. You've been a part of everything you've wanted to be a part of. You've been able to just live the life to its fullest, right? But you're sitting in a chair and it's your last like 5 minutes of life, and your great grandkids are sitting at your feet and they ask you, great grandpa, what's one piece of advice on how to live a good life? What are you going to tell them?
Um, that is a hard question. I think it would go back to what we were saying earlier, to remember to lead with a praxis rooted in love, and for your pedagogy to always be to help oppressed communities. Because without those things, without love, it goes back to what we were saying, that that isn't going to build like communities that are truly helpful and transformative and for the betterment of our society. And if your pedagogy isn't like constantly thinking about oppressed community, um, I feel like that becomes a life that is like self-fulfilling. And I think it would be important for anyone to have lived a good life, to have lived a life that is op- is open and helpful, and yeah, one that has supported their peers in some way. I feel like that's what defines a good life. I'm not really into the material stuff, or yeah, I feel like what really would make my great grandkids feel good is being having been able to truly have built a community of people they love, so that that way when it's their time to go, they can sit around those people and relish in their
Hell
final
yeah.
moments.
Hell yeah. I love that. Please plug the people with where they can find you on socials and how they can support you or any initiatives you're involved in moving forward, my guy.
Yeah, so you can find me on socials at 1-800-NASI. That's 1800-NASI. I write for the Kansas City Defender. I just recently did an exhibit from the February 27th through March 4th. That was like this temporary multiplication one. But excited to announce that there is a permanent exhibit that'll be being installed very soon that people will be able to go see.
Let's go.
There'll be an opening event and cocktail hour. So just stay tuned for that. It'll be coming later this year. Um, and yeah. And if
I
anybody
love it.
has any leads on Black queer history in Kansas City, let me know.
I love it. I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you tap in. P.S. 1800 Nasi will be a great rapper name if you ever decide to be an artist. Outside of that, ladies and gentlemen, leave a 5-star review as that is the only way we can grow. This is your boy, Coach Stutzer, aka CI double ZY, signing out, baby. Let's go.